Okay, on my workbench is a different Husqvarna. Don't be tricked and think that it's Sue's out of New York. This is a Husqvarna 21A as well. And this is going to be eventually heading to Michelle, who's out in North Carolina. And when I say eventually, I'm doing that to tease her a little bit, because I did promise her that this machine would ship this week, and it certainly will. But my week ends on Saturday, so it might not ship until Saturday, just so she knows that. I wanted to cover a couple of things. One is, you'll notice that this is a slightly newer Husqvarna, because what kind of tension control does it have? It's got the one that Sue's came with, which was the incorrect one for her model. The other thing I wanted to show you real quick, and I'm going to hopefully be able to get close enough to accomplish it. Let me try to get in really close. Turn my screen around. None of you, although some of you tried, and I certainly appreciate you jumping into it, none of you knew where to find the serial number on our Swedish beauties. So, see if I can line this up. Which way am I going? Ah, there we go. Hey! Some of you guessed the back by the motor. I can show you on the back of the motor. There's only motor information. It includes information like, let's see here. This happens to be a Husqvarna CI 21A. And made in Sweden. It talks about the needle. It gives you the royal crest over there on the left. It gives you the voltage. And it gives you the wonderful amperage, which on this model, like all 21As that I've had on my workbench, 1.5 amps. But that's not what we were looking for. What we were looking for, let me come out a little bit. What we were looking for is the answer as to where do they put the serial number on these Swedish beauties. Well, I can rotate this around and put the faceplate towards you and bring my lights in so we can hopefully get it illuminated nice and well. And my take-up arm is going to be a little bit in the way, so let me move that as well. There we go. Okay. So with all of that gobbledygook that I just did, you'll notice as we zoom in, right on top here, just behind and on the outside to where the tension control is, inside of the faceplate, is where Swedish beauties are serialized. Now that's valuable and not valuable. Now you know the answer to my contest question. The thing that's not horribly valuable, and I've said this before in videos, is unlike Singer, who meticulously track their serial numbers on the majority of their machines. The only exception to that is sometimes it's a little bit hit and miss on the 301s. It's a little bit hit and miss on the Spartans. But for the most part, they did a phenomenal job in documenting and serializing their machines so that folks knew pretty much what the year, month, and day of the manufacturing of that model was, how many were made in that year, and even sometimes where that model was made. So kudos to Singer, they did a great job. Husqvarna, not so much so. The Swedish are a little bit more laid back. They said, you know what, everyone else is putting serial numbers on them. We want to be different. We're not going to put it on the front in a conspicuous way because it looks, you know, maybe to them it doesn't look as pretty aesthetically. We're not going to put it on the bottom because that's just too much work to tilt your machine back, like on the Singer Featherweight, the Singer 201, the 221. So we're going to put it inside of the faceplate because they're going to be going in there to do various things like adjust the presser foot pressure, which is right here. So they also wanted to do that differently. Most folks put it on top. They didn't want it on top, so they stuck it inside of the faceplate. And they wanted to put the serial number in the same locality. So that answers that question as far as the contest question. So if I ever ask you again out in the future, or if someone else asks you, where the heck do I find my serial number on my Husqvarna? You know, particularly the 21A. There it is right there. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so I can get my camera angle straight. And what I'm wanting to do now is answer a question that came from more than one of you. And that is, the question was, what's the deal on the raceway on these Husqvarnas? I've heard that they're jam proof. I've heard that they don't have to be oiled. And I've heard a number of other things. Is this true or not? Well, the answer to those couple of things is yes and yes. The Swedish declared back in the early 50s that they had come up with a jam-proof raceway, which was pretty big news back then. I would say very big news. And so what they decided to do, and I see my camera angle's off a little bit. What they decided to do is come up with a raceway and hook that is able to have some movement. And by movement, I mean that unlike most raceways, when they're in there, they certainly oscillate, but they oscillate only in a circular fashion. They don't move in and out. They don't move outside of the parameters of what they're designed to do. Not true of the Husqvarna. If I put my finger on here, you can see it jiggles, probably even more so here if I do it. It jiggles from side to side. It's not broken. It's not defective. It's designed to do that. And the second thing that came up, so that is the secret, is the fact that this moves. It moves within a limited amount of space, but it's not rigid like most of the shuttles that are inside of that raceway. They're going to be very rigid. They're going to spin, oscillate in a circular fashion, but they're not going to move from side to side or from top to bottom. The other thing that I mentioned is there was the mention of they don't have to be lubricated. Well, in the paperwork that came out of Sweden, that's absolutely true. And it's partly because of the material that they used and the surface that they used to coat that shuttle and hook. I'm going to go ahead and remove, there's 3 screws that hold this retaining plate in, and then I'll be able to take out the hook and show you. I have extra ones. I could have just as easily taken one out, but I also wanted to show you that it's not horribly intimidating to remove this retaining plate, so that you're able to remove this if you want to clean it, if you want to just do whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out, and you can see now, I'll kind of tilt it back a little bit. That is connected to the direct drive, and that's what our shuttle and our retaining plate and ultimately our bobbin carrier and everything else affix themselves to. So the unique part, again, a couple of things, is you'll notice that the back part of this retaining plate has a coating on it. It's almost a Teflon type coating. So it's going to allow a couple of things to happen. One is it's going to allow a natural slipping, so that it's not a sticky, it's not a rigid type material that's going to create friction. It's going to allow that shuttle and that hook to move freely behind it, because this is the back side. The second thing is it's going to also allow this, the hook itself, to spin with this stainless steel coated type surface against it that, according to them again, does not require any lubrication. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, what do you think? I think that because of the rigors and the friction and the tension and everything else that occurs in this space, and how critical it is to providing good stitch quality and allowing those stitches to form down here, I do put a light coat using a Q-tip typically of a lubricating type oil, you know, whether it's machine oil, kerosene, or something else of that nature. When you put this back in, if you decide to take this out as I did, you'll notice, and I'm going to zoom in real close at this point, there we go. You'll notice at this point that there is a little notch on the back of this. You can probably see it right there. When you reinsert it, make sure that you get this notch into the matching notch. And actually, that's not going to help us, is it? I'll have to tilt this. The beauty of live cameras and shooting and trying to get the right angles and everything. I admire the people from Hollywood to some respect. Okay, let's go right out about to here. Hopefully that'll do it. Okay. So, anyway, what I was trying to do is to show you that there's matching notches. There's a notch here, and then there's a space down here on the back of this plate. I'll lower it down a little bit more. Okay, kind of point at it. There's a matching space right in here where this shuttle and hook will slide into, so that you can then reinsert it, put your retaining plate back over it. Again, make sure that you put that Teflon surface facing in, and then just put your 3 set screws in the different corners. Just like removing and putting a tire on a car, you want to make sure that you don't ratchet down one of them all the way. You want to do it evenly. And I would say starting bottom right, upper left, and then bottom left. So you'll start tightening here, go down to a point where it's basically just finger tight. Same thing here, and keep going around till they're snug. You don't want to over snug them, because these particular screws are set where they're designed again to allow that floating of the shuttle. Again, the Swedish technology of it being jam-proof, and you tighten it basically to the end of these threads, but you don't want to tighten it to a point where it goes up the shaft, because then you're not going to get that free movement, and you're probably going to have some issues with your upper stitch or with the overall stitch quality. So just tighten it so it's snug, but don't ratchet it down when you put it back on. Okay? All right. So those are just some of the tips I wanted to share with you. Again, answering that contest question as to where the serial number is. None of you were able to guess it, but guess what? The next time, if I ask the same question again and throw a impromptu contest out there, you guys are going to be on the money. Also wanted to show you a couple of tips on the hook system, the raceway, and the shuttle area. Just talk a little bit about that. Again, my belief is, even though they said by design it doesn't need lubrication in the raceway area, I would certainly put a light coat of lubricant using a Q-tip on the back of the shuttle and hook. And also, I would say cleaning the inside area that all of this rests on, not with oil. I would use probably a lower percentage rubbing alcohol and just gently swab that area off to get that residual oil off of there, because it doesn't help you back here, and you want to get that off so that it doesn't create the same problem that Sue's did, where you have too much oil and it's not just a super light coat, it becomes more saturated, and then all of a sudden you have operation issues with your sewing machine. So the other thing, another tip for Husqvarna owners or future owners, is your thread is going to follow this path through right here at the top of this retaining plate. Over time, because of the friction and speed that the thread moves through here, you're going to have some barb issues that will occur where the plastic will get barbed. All of a sudden you'll have thread breaking, you'll have other issues where the thread isn't feeding well through there, and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Do I have a problem with my upper tension? Do I have a problem with my bobbin carrier? what the heck is going on. And typically that's when I get an email or a note from one of you, which is fine. But I'll tell you a simple trick, and that is you want to go to your automotive section and get a very high grit sandpaper. I'm talking 1,000 plus. The highest I've been able to find locally is 3,000 grit, which you really don't need. I would say at least 1,000 grit. And then what you're going to do, see if I can get a small piece of sandpaper to demonstrate. What you're going to do, and this sandpaper I'm going to show you on camera is 1,200 grit, this stuff right here. And then what you're going to do is bring it down so it's small enough to fit within that space. And then what you're going to do is very gently, notice I said very gently, you're going to take that sandpaper and move it back and forth through here. Only if you're experiencing problems, or when you do an inspection, as I've shown you, where you can take all this out. If you kind of run your finger through there and you feel that there is an uneven surface, or the plastic is getting kind of barbed, go to your automotive section at your local retailer and pick up a high grit sandpaper, at least 1,000 grit. And then again, you're going to be going through that space where the thread feeds, so that you don't have to go ahead and replace this retaining plate. Number one, they're pretty hard to find. Number two, the person selling them generally is looking for a pretty penny. You can go to Walmart or any of your local retailers, pick up a package of high grit sandpaper, usually in the automotive section, for a couple of bucks, compared to $30 to $50 depending on who's selling this retaining plate, because inevitably just through use that area gets barbed and uneven and people start to have problems. So just another free tip to my subscribers, if you either want to be preemptive and deal with it, or if you want to as a result of problems you're having with thread breaking and other issues like that. Okay? All right. So I got to get to work again on Michelle's 21A and make sure that I get it done so that it can get back out to the post office, where I spend a lot of my time, and I can get this sent off to the great state of North Carolina. So she is a beauty. I'm really excited to get her finalized. At the same time, as you know, I'm working as well on Randy's Singer 1591. I have a FAF motor for a 332 that was sent to me, where I'm reconditioning and rebuilding that motor for a gentleman that wants to continue to use his cherished 332, but didn't want to have to buy a brand new machine. So for any of you out there, if you're losing motor power and you're having issues with that, you can by all means send me your motor without the entire machine. And I usually ask for the foot control as well, because the motor and foot control are so dependent on each other, and they both have to be reconditioned at the same time. Otherwise, it would be like doing an oil change on the car and not changing the oil, or not changing the filter. You got to do both to get that car and to maintain that car performing well. So, all right. So I'm going to go off camera now. Thanks so much for being a subscriber. Thanks so much for your involvement. It's so encouraging to me when I throw up a funny picture of a baby that's frustrated over tension control on a sewing machine, or other things up on the Facebook page, or I post a new video on the YouTube channel and you guys jump all over it with comments or with likes or whatever. It really is encouraging to me, so I can't thank you enough. So, all right, I hear Michelle from North Carolina saying, Scott, great, fine, get back to work. So I'm going to do that. Yes, ma'am. All right. So y'all have a great rest of the week. And thanks so much for watching. And stay tuned. There's more contests to come.